So, wir fangen nochmals an. Guten Abend und herzlich willkommen zurück zu den Drink-at-Home-Verkostungen. Es ist mittlerweile 19:24 Uhr. Ihr habt mich und meinen Gast bis jetzt nicht gesehen. Der Grund ist, wir hatten technische Probleme. Ich hoffe, wir haben sie jetzt im Griff und bin mir sicher, dass wir einen netten Abend verbringen, auch wenn er jetzt schon ein bisschen später ist als geplant. Wir haben einen neuen Kollegen, das ist der Kevin. Viele von euch werden ihn kennen. Alle die ihn nicht kennen, Kevin war verantwortlich in den letzten Jahren fürs Kraftbierfest und jetzt ist er zum Glück ein Teil von meinem Team geworden. Und er sitzt jetzt zu Hause, kann uns hören, ist super nervös und ist sicher super enttäuscht, dass er es nicht geschafft hat, dass wir um 19 Uhr online gehen. Aber das ist halt ganz einfach Pech und wir werden jetzt das Beste daraus machen. So, ganz kurz für all diejenigen, die zum ersten Mal dabei sind. Es freut mich natürlich sehr. Kurz über den Ablauf. Ihr habt in euren Paketen vorgefunden 2 Zetteln. Einen eben ganz kurz über die Online-Verkostung, über das heutige Thema. Wer ist mein Gast? Es ist Sierra Nevada in der Person von Brent. Wir werden dann gleich mit ihm ins Gespräch kommen. Auf der Rückseite findet ihr die Verkostnotizen mit den Bieren, die wir heute gemeinsam verkosten werden. Gleichzeitig ist es so, dass das die Reihenfolge ist, in der wir die Biere verkosten werden. Der zweite Zettel ist im Prinzip ein Verkostungsbogen, genauso wie da alle Biere sind eingetragen. Ihr könnt euch Notizen machen, müsst natürlich nicht, aber vielleicht ist es gar nicht so schlecht, wenn man sich über das ein oder andere Bier so seine persönlichen Notizen macht und sich danach erinnern kann und das ein oder andere vielleicht nachbestellen kann. So, in diesem Sinne, jetzt switchen wir zu Englisch. Brandon lebt zwar in Deutschland, aber er sagt, Deutsch ist noch nicht so sein großes Ding, aber ein paar Wörter kann er schon. So, good evening, Brandon. Hello.
Guten Abend, guten Abend. Ich danke Ihnen für Ihre Einladung. Ich verstehe Deutsch, aber mein Spreche ist nicht sehr gut. So, thank you for switching to English.
Okay, you're more than welcome. But it was good, you know.
Yeah, thanks.
The few words are really good.
Yeah, thanks.
German.
Mein Deutsch geht besser.
So, Brent, tell us a little bit about the person, Brent.
About me?
The past, how long you stay in Europe, you know, why you moved to Europe.
Sure.
When you joined Sierra Nevada. So a little bit.
Sure.
Overview over you.
Most people skip me and go right to my owner, Ken Grossman. They want to know all about him, so I'm flattered. Yes, in March of next year, I will have been with Sierra Nevada for 5 years. I was with another small craft brewery from the U.S. before that, so I've been doing this job almost 10 years in terms of sales, or in this case, you know, the Botschafter, right, the ambassador for beer. My wife and my 2 boys and I, we moved to Germany about 16 months ago, something like that, in the Frankfurt area, because, of course, Germany is a great beer market, but also, you know, the Frankfurt airport, I'm 2 hours from anywhere in Europe. So, and having said that, of course, I've worked with you a little bit. We've just launched the Netherlands. Germany, though, is my primary focus, but I've also worked with some partners in Scandinavia as well. So it's really just 2 of us, my boss and I, in Europe for the whole continent. So yeah, we're enjoying it. The market itself is much different than the U.S., you know, in a lot of ways. Of course, it takes a little longer for the beer to get here, but we do ship cold, so we try and keep it fresh as long as possible. But I've got my level 1 Cicerone. I've got my level 1 Sommelier. So I know what I'm tasting when I taste it. Of course, Cicerone is similar to the beer sommelier program that I think you guys have here. So, yeah, and until COVID, we were, well, and still now we're still really enjoying being in Europe, really enjoying, you know, the events that I've done and the partners we have, yourself included, Marcus. So, yeah, really looking forward to tasting tonight with you and some friends in Austria.
Cool. So I would say we're going to start with the first beer, and then we will talk a little bit about the history of Sierra Nevada, about the brewing philosophy, sustainability, the new Mills River brewery.
Yep.
So
I may have already opened mine. Sorry, I was impatient.
Yeah. We had a long time. So we're going to start with, I would say, the iconic, the flagship, the most, and one of.
Exactly.
I would say for a lot of people, it could be that it was the first entrance to craft beer, especially to American craft beer. Sierra Nevada Pale Ale is something like, it stays for the American way of brewing, that beer can be different, especially in the US, So,
yep.
Okay.
Exactly. And it pours nice and amber, as you can see. It's a really well put together and balanced beer. But the hops, there's an assertive amount of, Cascade hops in there. But if you can think back, or if you're not that old, I'm not 40 years old, but 40 years ago, almost to the day, actually, I think our birthday is November 7th of 1980. So almost to the day, when this beer came out, it was so hoppy compared to what we had in the United States at the time. Basically, all we had in the U.S. was gelbe Sprudelwasser. We had the industrial, what we call the industrial lagers, right? Your Budweiser, your Miller, your Coors, your Pabst, your Strohs, and a half a dozen, maybe a dozen other European lagers, adjunct lagers that had survived Prohibition, which in the United States was ended in the 1930s. So there was no variety. There was no dynamic flavor profile. It was just all very plain, if I may. And so when this beer came out, and again, just a beautiful color. It's obviously much darker than the European lagers that, of course, we drink plenty of here as well. But the first thing right away that you get for me is you get some pine and some grapefruit, and those are two real big indicators of West Coast hops, specifically the Cascade hop, the Centennial hop, the Magnum hop, which we use in our Torpedo, which we don't have on the tasting menu tonight. But again, very resiny and piney, grapefruity, and just a really nice assertive hop presence that, once you take a sip, is actually balanced out very nicely on the finish with a lot of caramel malts, a little Turo, and then we have, it's if you're drinking out of the bottle, that's going to be 5.6%. Some people have the can, which is the draft style can. That's 5%. Same ingredients. The difference is the can conditioning versus the little brewer's yeast with the sugar, and so it's a slight variation in the alcohol, but not super emphatic. You wouldn't normally, I don't think, unless you're a professional, be able to taste that difference. But so yeah, and then as I said, it is 40 years old. We are celebrating our 40th year. We were started by two gentlemen, King Grossman and Paul Camusi, in Chico, California, in 1980, as I said. But now Ken is our sole owner, and therefore we are actually the oldest and largest family-owned, by my definition, craft brewery in the United States. And there's a lot of debate what craft means, and that's fine. Basically, my two issues are, being family-owned, and then also we're not using adjuncts, meaning no rice, corn, or any other shortcut to produce our beer. It's a 100% malt recipe, and it's, of course, using hops, water, and yeast. So in some ways, our beer does still follow Reinheitsgebot, right? But
yeah, that's true. Yeah, but not the first question is coming. You know him. Martin is saying hello. Martin Voigt from Pro Beer.
Oh, nice. Very good.
And he's asking if you already drank the pale ale in the 80s.
Did I drink it? No.
Yes, did you drink it? Yeah.
No, I was born in 1983. So, okay. I missed the first 3 vintages, but
okay. But your mother drank it, and you get it.
Exactly.
You got some Muttermilk.
Muttermilk, genau. I was born on 11/11, so I've got that connection with Germany anyway.
Okay.
But and King Grossman, our owner, was also born on 11/11. So it's fun trivia time for everybody.
Okay, cool.
But no, I do remember my first pale ale. Actually, I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, and it was in a bar in downtown Atlanta. I was not 21 because you were supposed to be 21 before you start drinking in the U.S., which is entirely too old. So I may have had a fake ID, and I may have ordered a Sierra Nevada pale ale, and I may have drank it when I was 19. That's okay.
That's a good age.
This is going on the internet, isn't it? You can delete that. Let's edit that out.
Okay, no, it's all fine. So food-wise, when we say, okay, Sierra Nevada pale ale, we're going to pair it with some kind of food, what you can recommend to all the people are listening at the moment? What goes well?
Yeah, absolutely. So first thing I would make mention of is we're sort of tasting from light to more complex. I would say heavier because the Hoptimum is the heaviest beer we have, but the Wild Little Thing is sort of in its own category. So we're going from light to more complex, but I would argue our second beer is a little lighter than pale ale. That being said, I do think pale ale is an appropriate beer to sort of start your evening off. So for me, and when I'm doing beer dinners, it's a great, starter beer, reception beer. Pass around some cheese, really creamy cheeses, especially. I know it's not Austrian, but like Emmentaler and Gouda and some of those Swiss cheeses actually go phenomenally well with this beer. But on the other, so that's a nice, creamy, nutty flavor that pairs well with the acidity and the hoppiness of beer. The other thing I would say is that also, if you go the other side of it, spicy food. And to me, and I think I could speak for some of my fellow countrymen, when we have the hot wings or the Mexican food or sehr scharf essen, we like to pair those with hoppier beers, and that's because the receptors on your tongue that are picking up the alpha acids within the hops are also the same receptors that pick up the capsaicin in pepper. And so they sort of set each other off. So it's a really versatile beer. And that's sort of, I guess, my point. I mean, you can go with super light, easy finger food type things, or you can go with some really hot Thai food as well. Is a great pairing with pale ale, I think. And then, of course, the classic, a burger, a fatty burger with some cheese on it, which again,
cheese.
Yeah, this acidity and this hoppiness, and it's not super bitter, but it's got enough that it'll cut through the fattiness of the meat, but not overwhelm the meat. And that's the key. I mean, obviously, you want it to complement, not overwhelm. So I think, again, for what we're going to drink today, I would offer this as probably the most versatile food beer we have today. Not the most food-friendly beer we make, but yeah, about that. Right.
But Brent, we also have Austrian Emmentaler and Austrian Gouda. So
you do?
We also have our own cheesemaker. So
I'm glad to know.
We're in this lucky position that we also have our own cheeses. So
no doubt. And I'm not a cheese expert. The only reason I know the Swiss is because I just drove through there a few weeks ago. So I saw those and I was like, oh shit, this is where those come from. Anyway, so that's where that came up. But yes, nice creamy cow cheeses, perfect.
Yes, I completely agree. So in the 80s, 1980, Ken started the brewery. His original Brew Kit is now touring inside the States, because I saw it last year in Denver at the Great American Beer Festival.
Great American Beer Festival.
First time he really showed it to the public again, and he started with this kit in 1979, huh?
1980. I mean, it was old dairy equipment, right? So it was old dairy equipment, speaking of cows and milk, and he basically flipped over the vat that captured the milk from milking the cows, right? And put a burner, coils and a burner underneath it. And, Yeah, so it was old dairy equipment, and you are correct. It was refurbished, or it has been refurbished. He sold it to a small brewery in Northern California, I believe, and they used it up until I think about a year or two ago, and then they sold it back to us because what Ken wanted to do was obviously refurbish it, make it nice, slap it on the back of a truck, a large LKV, is that right?
Yes.
And then drive it around touring the country to finish up at the Great American Beer Festival. And we were going to do that this year. Of course, things change. But yes, it is still operable. My understanding is that he is still planning on brewing on our birthday. The original system on the 40th birthday, which, as I said, I'm 99% sure that's the 7th of November. And so I'll try and get my hands on a bottle of that first batch, but or the 40th first batch, right? But yes, as they began to grow, it actually, Germany steps into the picture. Ken came over, I want to say in 1985, and actually bought an old German brew house, a copper 100%, not just copper jacketed, but a copper brew house from a brewery in Aschaffenburg, which is in Bavaria, of course, not too far from me. And he spent so much money on the brew house and on shipping it back to the U.S. that he didn't have the money to set it up. So it sort of sat around for a number of years, and then he was finally able to get it online. And that's the brew house you've seen. That's in Chico, and that's, for those that don't know, that's the town at the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountains. The Sierra Nevadas are every bit as dramatic as the Alps. I don't know if they're older, but they're certainly as sharp. And of course, we ski and we do all those same things that your friends in Western Austria do. But yeah, so good. Typically a good water source when there's not a drought in California. But also a really beautiful place, and not too far from, most North American hops are grown in the Pacific Northwest, and it's really not too far from there either. So a great location for the brewery. And again, the current brew house as it is now has sort of grown over the years until we reached capacity, and we had to build another brewery. And we can talk more about that whenever you want.
Yes, I would say we're gonna go immediately to the next beer, to the California IPA, and then we're gonna talk about.
It's a California IPA, yeah?
Yes, that's the next one.
There we are.
Okay.
This is a really cool and unique beer because though it is brewed in the United States, and it's brewed, of course, by us, we only make this beer for the European market. We do not sell this beer in the U.S. On rare occasions, there may be a keg of it on at one of our breweries, but you will not find it in the general market in retail, right? So a super unique beer, and if you can check it in on Untappd, those of us that are on Untappd, certainly, you'll find that it's certainly a lighter beer than what we just tasted. The idea, of course, it's called California IPA, a citrusy and sessionable ale. For those that don't know, the concept of sessionability, or to be a session beer, means that typically, there's no law, but it means that the beer is typically below 5% alcohol, so that you can have one or two or three and not fall off your bike on the way home from the bar. So it's a very approachable beer, as is the pale ale. It wasn't 1940 or 1980, right? 40 years ago. But the California IPA is actually, while it is an India pale ale because of the amount of hops that are involved, it's actually super approachable, very light, and it only has 5 more EBUs than the pale ale does. So it's 40 to pale ale's 35. So it's really not that much more bitter, but it has a lot, to me, more lemongrass, and more citrus flavor. But again, it's, as you can see, it's completely translucent, right? Yeah. So it's clear. Helles, I think, would be a good word for it. Although it tastes nothing like a Helles, of course. But again, something super approachable at 4.2%. This is a great beer, as is the pale ale. I think these two beers, to get a friend or a family member that doesn't really drink craft beer, they're maybe intimidated by it. They think everything's 100 IBUs or 10% alcohol, and it's really not. We really do well with this in the EU market. I would say it's probably our second best-selling beer, behind, of course, pale ale. So it's really been a good mover for us, and I think it's because of the approachability that people who don't know a lot about craft beer can at least pick this up and not be intimidated by it.
But Brent, sorry to interrupt you. Why you only brew it for Europe? It's too light for America, or what is the reason to brew a beer only for an export?
Yeah, great question. I think the answer is twofold. Number one, in a practical sense, most of the countries in Europe tax more heavily for higher alcohol, right, or for higher gravity. It's actually usually based on gravity, which coincides with alcohol usually. So for us to ship into as many countries as we do in Europe, I think we're up to 17 now total. We wanted to have an offering that was lower in alcohol so that the price point was more approachable for us. So that's the business answer. The beer answer, like the flavor of the beer and why don't we sell this in the U.S., I think there's a concern or maybe a slight worry that it would take away from our pale ale, from the focus and from the energy on our pale ale. Granted, they taste nothing alike, in my opinion. But I think when you talk about pale ales versus session IPAs, I've always kind of said pale ales were the original session IPA, right? I mean,
that's a good explanation.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of always have, and so I think there's a hesitation there. Obviously, the U.S. is our biggest market. It's our home market, and so I think we're really hesitant to introduce a beer that's going to take away focus or shelf space or market share from our flagship, from the pale ale. So whereas in Europe, because we're so new, yes, you and I are familiar with pale ale, and most of the people watching this are, but your average consumer probably isn't. And so it's good to have, a green pale ale can flanked with a blue or bottle, a nice blue California IPA. There's no confusion about where that beer comes from, right? Mm-hmm. And so many folks in Europe have been to California or have been to the U.S. So it's really just about, hey, these are some flavors that might remind you of the West Coast. Mm-hmm. But so hopefully that explains that. But I mean, I'm not saying it will never be available in the U.S. It just isn't right now. And so it's unique and cool that we have the opportunity, you and I, not my colleagues in the U.S., to enjoy this.
Sure, they can get some cans after canning out from the canning line.
Yeah,
but it's okay. Martin is asking a question: if it's true that the first ever brewed beer of Sierra Nevada wasn't a pale ale.
That is correct. Does he know what it is? Yes, it was the stout. I was going to ask him the trivia question. Yes, it was the stout. So our first three beers were stout, porter, and the pale ale. Mm-hmm. And the stout and the porter, of course, darker beers have the luxury of being able to mask off flavors, right? Mm-hmm. And so those are good first-time beers for home brewers, which is what Ken was. He was a home brewer. He owned a bicycle shop, and he brewed for fun. And then he bought a beer or a home brewing shop. So he sold hops and yeast and malt extract and all the equipment to people that just wanted to brew beer at home. And so, yes, the short answer is yes. And that is what That is what Ken is brewing again on the birthday on the original pilot system, or on the original old system. He is brewing stout for the anniversary. So as I said, I'll try and get it. But of course, pale ale became the sort of sensation and the hit. Although as a side story, porter got a real cult following after Jerry Garcia, the guitarist for the Grateful Dead. I don't know if they really got over to Europe much, but he would always have a 6-pack of Sierra Nevada porter backstage, and so the Deadheads would seek out the porter, in the 80s and the early 90s when the Grateful Dead were still touring. So porter has got its own sort of cool following. The stout's certainly unique in that it's a year-round stout. Most breweries only brew them for the wintertime. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's those were the original 3 for sure. Great question.
Cool. Great answer. By the way. Pale ale. So now, how big is the whole production of Sierra Nevada? What was the output of 2019?
Yeah, great question. So I converted it from case equivalents, which is how we measure our beer. So think of a case equivalent as 24 12-ounce beers. Of course, we have to be difficult with our imperial system. We can't just switch to the metric for some reason, but I think I calculated it out at 1.6 million hectoliters for 2019. Okay. And we'll beat that. We'll beat that this year. We're growing actually pretty strongly because of the grocery stores selling our beer in the U.S. So I think we'll be at somewhere around 1.8 or 9 this year for 2020. So for the pale ale, how much of that is pale ale? I would say somewhere around 44%, 45%. So a little less than half is pale ale, which is still fantastic for a brand that's been around 40 years. And it's actually growing this year. I mean, it's stayed relatively flat the last few years with so many new breweries and so many new beers. It's really held up. It's really stayed strong. And this year it's actually grown. Okay. Which is awesome. So yeah, about 43, 45%, somewhere in there for that.
But it speaks for the product, even in these competitive markets, especially in the States, as you mentioned already, there are so many breweries at the moment, and everyone is searching for hazy. Yeah. And it's good to hear that also in this difficult year, you get a growth with pale ale. And so, as we start the conversation, the pale ale is something like a go-to, it's really, yes. If you want to drink a beer and you're really into hoppy beers, then pale ale, you can drink it all night long. So easily. All night.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. And
also this one is something, and they can see, it's a fairly point, that people are over in the US or at Chico a little bit scared, to bring this beer on the market because it's also kind of a trend, it's low in alcohol, it's sessionable, it's something new, and then maybe it can beat some shares of the pale ale. So all these points I really can see and understand, what you explained us already so far.
Exactly. And it may come out in the US. I'm not saying never say never, right? Niemals sagt niemals, but it's but it's a good beer that we've got to ourselves for right now. So it's cool stuff.
So I would say we open the next beer, and then we're going to talk with the next beer. We're going to talk about Mills River, about the newest brewery.
That sounds like a plan.
So the new beer, next beer is Hazy Little Sink IPA.
Yes.
It's in a nice purple yellow color. Everyone who knows me knows that I'm not a really friend of purple, but the liquid inside is really, really good.
Well, it's the color of royalty, purple. So you're a commoner, so no reason for you to like. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I'm tell you off the records then why I don't like purple. But
no, totally joking. This is a really cool beer and something very different, obviously, than the previous 2 beers. Yes, it says IPA, but that's just sort of a guideline. As you can see, this is what? It's Klug, yeah? Ungefiltert. It's
ungefiltert, unfiltered.
Yes, and that's on purpose. And it's not like a Weiss beer where the yeast is just hanging down at the bottom and we stir it up. That's not it at all. The haze is retained in the beer because of the proteins in flaked oats. So this is not Reinheitsgebot. This is we actually do use some flaked oats in this beer, which lends a little fruitiness as well to it. Oats are the mouthfeel is a little fuller, but also it's a flavor enhancer as well. So now this beer, so we talked a lot about pale ale, and we talked about its sort of impact on the craft beer world. Was one of the originals. It changed how people saw what beer could be. So it quickly, it's predominantly the Cascade hop, which in 1980 there was not much Cascade being grown. Of course, in Austria, I think you guys grow some pretty good hops, no? Because
we grow hops, but not Cascade.
Yeah, well, because Bavaria grows an absolute ton of hops, and so at the time in 1980, you really couldn't find the Cascade hop. Up until about 3 years ago, Cascade was the largest cultivated hop in the U.S. and maybe the world, but I don't. Maybe not, but I do know in the U.S.
Can be Salsa, can be a big one. Yeah. Well, and also.
But this beer, when this beer came out, the hazy little thing, we came out with a sort of a regular edition, and then this is our session edition. So again, sessionability, low alcohol. When this beer came out, it was sort of on this front range of this hazy IPA trend, but also one thing that a lot of these newer IPAs use a lot of is the Citra hop. So the Citra hop is now the most cultivated hop in the U.S. So it jumps Cascade, I think, two years ago, maybe last year. So anyway, so you'll notice right away, when you're smelling it, totally different senses. Me, the first thing that jumps out for me is like pineapple and mango, or like mango. What's the other one? Like pitted fruit, even as well, like a really ripe peach or an apricot, like a lot of stone fruit.
Papaya, it's more or less like
papaya. Absolutely, thank you for that word.
Fruit salad. Yeah.
But super robust mouthfeel, and I like tasting this right behind the Cali, because the Cali, I mean, I've heard some people describe it as light and all those words that go along with that. And this is essentially the same style of beer using totally different hops, but this mouthfeel is so full and it's so, it endures. It sticks around a lot longer. It's certainly something that for us, and it's only 4.6%. I think that's right. Yes, and it's good to check myself. And but for a 4.6% beer, what you're drinking, I think you taste a lot more hops. There's a lot more flavor in this beer. If unfiltered beer is your thing, and of course, as we know, a lot of our fellow breweries are calling them New England IPAs, which is sort of where they originated. We don't call ours New England IPAs because we don't have a brewery in New England.
Okay.
Which
makes sense.
New England is the far northeast of the U.S. Our second brewery, so we talked about Chico and opening our brewery in Chico with a nice German copper system. We, in 2015, in 2014, we were out of space, right? We needed more space to brew. But the brewery in Chico had sort of grown to its capacity. It couldn't physically get any bigger because the town of Chico was surrounding it. So we needed to build a second brewery, which is a good problem to have. And it made sense, though, for us to look on the east coast of the United States for lots of reasons, but logistics is the biggest. I mean, the U.S., as many of you know, is gigantic. So for us to open another brewery on the other side of the country would help the brewery pay for itself in 5 years, just in the cost, saving the shipping costs from Chico. Instead, now we're shipping out of a little town in western North Carolina, not too far from Asheville. It's called Mills River. And so you have to think, so that brewery is going to ship as far north, to Canada, and it's going to ship as far south to Miami, right? And it's much closer and more efficient to ship from the East Coast to those locations than it is from California. So that was a huge reason for doing that. And of course, the breweries have a lot of similarities, but their locations make them unique in a lot of fun and cool ways. One being in California, we have so many solar panels on the top of our brewery and producing our own energy or producing energy. We have actually had so much that we've sold some energy back to the city of Chico. So we are completely energy independent in Chico because of the amount of the plentiful sunshine. In North Carolina, it's basically a rainforest. And so we don't
like
get
my forest.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Did you get that in Mills River, that picture? But
unfortunately not.
But in Mills River in North Carolina, that part of North Carolina, whereas the sun is less powerful or it shows itself less, the water is less of an issue. So in California, we experience a lot of droughts. But in North Carolina, we have an abundance of water. So we actually use some cisterns around the brewery that capture a lot of the rainwater that we use for things like sinks or toilets, things like that. I mean, it's potable. It's fine. We can cook with it. Those things after we treat it. We have our own water treatment plant at the brewery. But water is no problem at either brewery. But it's just that California tends to the state run out of it from time to time. We're very lucky. Both of our breweries have very deep wells, brunnen underneath the breweries themselves, and so the aquifer does replenish. So that's where we get our water from underground, not from the rivers that run next to our breweries. I get that question a lot. No. But anyway, so and that's the cool thing too. The water in North Carolina is very different from the water in California. Just like the water in Leipzig for Gozas is different from the water in Bavaria for Helles. So what we have to do is chemically balance the water in both places. And one we remove minerals and one we add minerals, and then we get the pH right. And it's very scientific, way above my head. But the idea is that you could get a beer, a pale ale from California and a pale ale from North Carolina, and all things being equal, they were brewed on the same day, so they're the same freshness. You shouldn't be able to tell a difference. And I haven't met anyone who can, but
okay. Well, that's good.
Maybe Ken. maybe he would know.
Maybe.
So that's kind of cool.
But there's a story, because of this big forest close to I've never been there, and hopefully it will come, in the next couple of years when we will be allowed to travel again. But there is something, you were cutting a lot of trees there, yeah?
Yeah.
To build the brewery, but then you used the trees for the roof?
The Abbauen, the construction. Yeah. It was like 400 million linear feet or something like that, which again, not metric, sorry, but it was a lot of, we had to cut some trees down. We left as many as we could, but some we had to cut down, but every single tree we cut down, we used in the construction of the brewery. So as you walk through the brewery, you see wood everywhere. Everything from the walls, the chairs, the tables, we repurposed all the wood within the construction of the brewery. Add that to the water cisterns I told you about. And we do have solar panels in North Carolina. They just don't capture as much sun, as I mentioned. Add that to our CO2 recapturing program, our methane recapturing program. We have restaurants at both breweries. We're 99.6% landfill divergent, basically meaning we either reuse, recycle, or for the restaurant, compost everything. And that's actually why our brewery in Mills River is one of only 2 breweries in the entire world that is LEED Platinum certified. LEED meaning leadership in, and I want to make sure I say it right, leadership in energy and environmental design. And can you guess the only other brewery in the world? It's in Europe.
Gösser.
Which one?
I think it's Gösser in Austria.
No, they're not LEED Platinum. They could be LEED Gold or Silver or Green.
Yeah, but they are CO2 neutral. But maybe one of the listeners can tell me what Gösser exactly is. But because I know they are
Google is a magical thing. We could look that up. But the only other brewery that's LEED Platinum certified in the whole world, at least as of 6 months ago, the last time I looked, is Guinness.
Guinness.
Yeah.
But they're Ireland-based, so Dublin-based Guinness brewery.
They're Dublin-based Guinness brewery, yes. Not Maryland or wherever else they're brewing. Yes. So it's something we're extraordinarily proud of as a company. It's sort of always been our commitment to sustainability, environmental responsibility, understanding that we produce a commodity, but we rely on natural resources, right? We must have water, and we rely on crops with grain and hops. And, unfortunately, as the climate sort of changes, we have to be in tune with our impact on the climate, because this climate, wherever we are, if we're talking about Canada, where we get most of our malts, or the Pacific Northwest, where we get most of our hops, it does affect the product at the end of the day. It affects the beer if the hops and the malts are subpar because it was a dry summer or a wet summer or a fire summer where everything's burning. And so
more and more, especially in California.
So for us, it's what we can do to make sure we are being environmentally responsible as a consumer of a natural resource, again, water and crops. So I think it's really important. Something, I wish we could tell that whole story on this can, right? Like I wish, sometimes there's just not the space, but hopefully I can, hopefully.
And it must be a really, really big can, maybe similar to these Faxe cans, maybe you saw this in Europe, this Faxe 1 liter can.
Yeah.
Space to tell stories in a can. Going back to this hazy little thing, what kind of food will go well with hazy little thing?
Yeah, great question. So again, the old standby, hops are good with spice, but for this beer, because it doesn't, to me, have a lot of bitterness at all, and it's not supposed to. That's the idea of an unfiltered IPA. The idea is all the hops are there, but none of the bitterness. So again, an approachable beer. For me, I kind of like to, push chefs to pair this sort of with something sweeter and something dessert like Nachtisch stuff, like something like a lemon meringue pie, or something like even like a creme brulee, or like some sort of not chocolate, no chocolate. It's got to be a fruit dessert, like a fruit-based dessert. That to me is great with this beer because of the residual sweetness that's in this beer. Also, though, something else that I kind of like because of, again, the citrus mouthfeel and the overall sort of presence of, as we said, papaya and mango, is seafood, light seafood, things like scallops. Or mussels, scallops, anything light. Like salmon, I think is a little too heavy for this beer, but I think I think like a whitefish, flounder, something lighter in the seafood range that you've cooked with maybe a little lemon sprinkled over it, something like that. That's a really nice pairing with this beer as well. So again, versatility. You could go dessert.
I wish I can get this cheesecake in front of me, for example, now cheesecake together with this beer, maybe with a little slightly of something like a mango puree on it.
Yes.
Perfect.
Cheesecake would be a magical pairing with this. But again, scallops, if you're cooking with some garlic and some lemon and butter, that's really all you need, salt and pepper. And then this beer, just a really easy pairing. The beer won't overwhelm the scallops and vice versa.
No.
Yeah, man. I don't know why I have scallops over mine. Maybe I'll have some tomorrow night. But yeah, I think again, a very versatile, and again, because of the low bitterness and the low alcohol, approachable beer. And that's one thing these first three beers have, I think, very much in common. Flavor-wise, I don't think they're anywhere close to each other. But approachability for friends and family that have not had the beers before, really, really easy to start them off with one of these for sure.
What about the other ones? You know, you already mentioned, there's Hazy, not the little version, the green version. And
the green version. Yeah.
Green version, Hazy IPA, and then there was the yellow version, the Imperial Hazy IPA.
I've got both in my cellar.
Will those beers come back to Europe, or will you get only focused really on Hazy little thing?
So, good question. I'll answer with the fantastic. You're talking about the fantastic, right? Was the double? Yeah. If you put an order in with Grand Cru, you can get some fantastic. That's no problem. It's here now. Yes. So hopefully you'll see some more fantastic around. It is available. It's a year. Both are year-round beers. All three of these that we've just had are year-round beers. So there's no other than the demand in the U.S., which is sky high because of people going to the grocery store and drinking at home now. Other than the demand, there's no scarcity of the product. As to the green hazy can, yeah. So that one is our second best-selling beer in the U.S. So I said that Pale Ale was 43, 44. I think hazy's well over 20% of the rest from the rest of our portfolio. We had it in Europe, and then for the same reasons that we thought California IPA, a lower alcohol IPA, would be better. That's why we introduced the session version of Hazy. A lot to do, again, on the business side, the amount of taxes, and from many European countries, on gravity or alcohol by volume. So I know that was the big driving force. It's the same beer. It's literally the same ingredients. We just stopped fermentation a little bit sooner so that we can keep that ABV at 4.6, yes, than the regular, which is 6.7. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's 2 good points, percentage points higher for essentially the same taste. So yeah, I mean, it's been in Europe, as I said. If somebody just had to have it, we brew it. But yeah, I think with Europe, just again, given the cost,
which makes sense.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for me, because I really like the green can.
Yeah.
The taste, but it's okay. It completely makes sense,
Yeah.
From that perspective.
Yeah, and here's what I'd like to do one day with you, Marcus. We'll take the purple can and the green can, and we'll blindfold ourselves, and we'll see if we can figure it out, because they're pretty similar. But I'm with you. I like a higher ABV beer, but
yeah, also brings some kind of flavor, and mouthfeel, and normally. If we are really professionals, then we should.
That's right. Do you sell this? What do you sell this for? €2.50? Or not you, but is it on the shelf? Is it on a shelf at a bottle shop? €2.50 or what?
Something like this. But to be honest, I really don't know. Maybe one of our listeners can tell us the price, my retail price, because I really don't have any idea. For me, the most important thing is people like it. It's approachable. Really, the prices are superb for that kind of quality of beers, and so. But I can't tell you the exact shelf price at the moment.
No worries.
No, it's okay. Katarina is asking, how did COVID impact the sales of Sierra? I know we can talk about global. I think it makes more sense than split it in Europe and in the States. What you can see, are there some trends popping up? Of course, on trade, so bars, restaurants are hitting really, really. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, supermarkets picking up.
Yep. Yeah, it's a great question. We are unique, I would say, in that because of our age, how old we are, our distribution level in the United States, and the fact that, yes, every state has sort of done its own thing, but for the most part, we, as an overall business, are about 80%, so 80% in the focused in the off trade or the retail or the supermarket. We only have about 20% of our brand or our sales, 20% coming from gastronomy, restaurants, bars, whatever.
Really?
So actually, for us, it wasn't the end of the world. It's not the end of the world, and I don't say that lightly. A lot of you mentioned how many breweries there are in the U.S. Over 7,000 at the beginning of the year. A lot of those guys are hurting because they are predominantly focused in the on-premise, which is a much more profitable. Let's face it, kegs of beer are better for the brewery than individual 12-ounce cans or bottles of beer.
Packaging and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, keg beer is always more profitable. So for us, losing 20% of our business overnight, that hurts, of course. But we were sort of saved, and I want to be very sensitive, but I want to say, like, but it was okay because of our retail presence. It actually took over for the losses that we had in gastronomy. So as a business, as a brewery, in terms of volume, we are actually growing. But that's a huge but. Like aber, yeah, we have to be very cautious because this won't last forever, hopefully. And so, it's funny, we don't actually have this beer, but we actually brewed a beer called Dankful that is 100% of the proceeds are going to different, I guess charities is the word, but different partners to help our friends in gastronomy and restaurant and bars with their staff being laid off or with whatever the situation. So we're very sensitive to the impact that COVID has had on the bar and restaurant world, which without, I don't think craft beer survives, and I don't think craft beer would be where it is now. So just because less of our business was in the on-premise, I think it's really important to say, listen, it still needs to be a focus, and it still is. Now in Europe, it's a little bit different. We were actually more on-premise driven in Europe. It's the nature of a market where we're shipping our beer overseas, and so the cost, somebody goes in, buys a beer for €2.50 at a flasher shop, or they go in and buy a 0.3 liter for €6 at their bar, from draft. So it's impacted us differently in different markets. But if you're looking overall at the whole picture, we're okay. We've committed our leadership, our owner, Ken Grossman, who I will probably mention 20 more times before the end of the night, he's committed to not laying anybody off. We haven't lost anyone. We're still in the U.S. Medical insurance is a little different than Europe, but we're committed to still paying our full-time employees insurance, and keeping everybody working and safe, obviously. To be safe and to do the proper protocols and so that we don't have to shut the breweries down. We're also, I would say, very lucky that brewing in general in the entire U.S. was considered an essential job. Unlike South Africa, Mexico. Mexico, the home of Corona beer, Grupo Modelo, one of the largest beer producers in the world, they were considered non-essential, and their breweries had to shut down for the first lockdown in March, April, May. And that's catastrophic. it's catastrophic. So we're very lucky that you know, we've I guess weathered the storm. I don't know how that would translate to German. I try and translate it.
Winter? What? Weather?
Weather the storm. Like you stay, you hunker down as the storm passes over you.
Gegen den Sturm. Du bist gegen den Sturm. Du
yeah, gegen Sturm.
Gegen die Masse.
Yeah. So you try and just move forward. And this is my seventh online tasting, which is a great way to sort of, you know, do what we can. Otherwise, I'd be in Vienna in 2 weeks for the craft beer festival. We were going to do some things together. So we make it work, right? We're still brewing. We're still selling beer. People are still drinking the beer, you know, and then we're brewing beers specifically to help those that were impacted by it, just like we did with the California wildfire. So that's why I think it's so important to be with a family-owned company, family-owned brewery that's really more driven by doing the right thing than by the bottom line. And I think when you do that, the business takes care of itself, you know?
Yeah, I see this point. So Thankful is already available in the Austrian market. So we already got the first shipment. So nice. Everyone who wants to get hand-on and support the gastronomy in the States, then you can order it already. And the next point is, you know, Europe, when you told us that on-trade is bigger in Europe compared to the States, it makes completely sense, in my opinion, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because normally you build a brand in on-trade, so in bars and restaurants. And from that point on, then maybe you can go to off-trade, you know? So completely see this point, and it's a fair point, and makes sense.
Yep. And by the way, I haven't even tasted the Thankful yet.
Why?
Because it just got to Germany, and I haven't had my distributor send me any samples yet. So that's the only reason.
If you're nice to us, then I can send you tomorrow. I can.
No. I'll ask. I think Hamburg might be a little closer than Vienna.
Then Vienna.
But
no, faster. No.
Yeah, I just haven't had it yet for no reason other than it literally just got to Germany, I think, in the last week or two. So, you know, it's crazy times, but I do have to taste it. I look forward to tasting it. So
really intense IPA, really. You will like it.
Nice.
Really,
good.
You will like it.
Good.
Okay, Brent. I would say we're going to open or crack the next can, huh?
Okay, let's do it. Let's crack the next can.
Crack it.
and the Stark thing on here, I love this. This is I forgot about this. It says family owned, operated, and argued over. So just in case you weren't sure.
Always written on the cans, yeah?
Always.
Of the top.
Yeah. So Tropical Torpedo. This is let's see. This is this came out about 4 years, 3.5 years ago. This was before what we call the haze craze. This was before the New England IPA craze, right? Was this craze for hoppy? They're all hoppy IPAs. This desire for more tropical tasting IPAs, as opposed to the West Coast IPA. And if you want to know, like, the difference of West Coast IPAs would be like our Torpedo. Would be very piney, very, very grapefruity, very bitter, super high in alcohol. Our Torpedo is over 7%. So about 3 years ago, right before the haze craze, this whole tropical IPA craze kind of started, and this was our sort of offering for that. Again, totally filtered, extremely light compared to like the pale ale, and then the next one we're going to have, you'll see, the Hoptimum. But completely light beer, so a little bit closer to California IPA in terms of how it looks. A little less yellow, a little bit more orange to me, more amber. But when you taste it, it tastes completely different than the Cali. Way more supple mouthfeel for sure. It is 6%, so this is more in line with a true IPA as opposed to the session IPAs we had before this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a typical IPA is anywhere from between 6% to 7.5%, depending. So this is much more of that that sort of to me, I get, and I don't know why. Maybe it's because my honeymoon was in Bali, they gave me a dragon fruit every morning. This to me is all about that white pulpy dragon fruit. I don't know why I get it. I just do. And then to me as well, a lot of sort of stone fruits, pitted fruits like peach, and maybe even mango, I would say to a certain extent. Not, I think, as supple as like the hazy. With the hazy, to me, I get ananas, right? Like total pineapple.
It's fresh, it's more like a fruit salad, but this is more balanced. There's more body, there's more character, but still, it's fruity, and really this fruitiness stays on the tongue, it really stays.
I agree. And I mean, it's almost flirting with sweet. It's not sweet, but it's flirting with sweet. It's close, because this bitterness is much higher than the previous 3 beers. Obviously, I think.
How high is the IBU now?
I believe it's 55. I actually have to double check that.
Maybe a little bit higher.
Yeah, there's a reason you had to send me this one, because I haven't had this because we don't sell this a lot as much in Germany. I'm sorry. The IBUs, and I just checked, is actually 30. So I'm an idiot.
Really? Only 30.
Only 30, but it tastes much more bitter than the hazy to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. But a lot of hops in this one.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly, New World, well, all New World hops, of course. I mean, Mosaic, Azaka, Comet, Eldorado, Idaho 7, Bravo. Bravo is actually the bittering hop for this beer. And, of course, 2-row pale, little Munich malt in this one. And totally filtered, as I said. But yeah, just a really interesting, and I think, appropriate beer for its place.
It's a really big... So it's not doing phenomenal in Austria, but because I'm wondering, it's not a big thing in Germany. It's also not a big thing in Austria, but overall it's doing okay, and people really, which had it once, they come back for it,
Sure.
I'm really happy with this beer. But what is the reason? Because it's available in cans and in bottles. Of course, pale ale is also available in cans and in bottles, but I guess tropical is less important, way smaller compared to pale ale.
Yeah.
Why it's available in Europe in both packages, in bottles and in cans?
So I think the original idea, originally when the beer came out, it was only in bottles.
With a blue
and it had that nice baby blue label, that nice light blue label. And it did really, really well for us. But what we found in the U.S. was that the people that were drinking that beer really wanted it exclusively in cans, because the occasions that they were drinking it were typically outdoors, poolside, beachside, riverside, whatever. And in the U.S., it's really not acceptable to drink out of glass when you're near water or kids running around and playing. So that's one of many reasons, and we can talk more in a bit about why cans as opposed to bottles. So what happened was we took the beer Tropical Torpedo and we just took it from bottles, and then we started doing cans for it. And then, certain markets in Europe, the UK especially, are really driven by cans. So we found that the can Tropical Torpedo was actually doing much better than the bottle had. But then in other markets, Germany, the bottle is still the preferred vessel for beer. So it's really just it's just so tough to know, by market. So I think that's a reason for this beer, because we're still in the U.S. brewing it or packaging it in both. We have the availability here. So let me ask you, Markus, what works better in Austria, not Tropical Torpedo, just in general in the market? Do you find that cans or bottles for craft beer are more preferred?
When it comes to craft beer,
yeah,
you can see that the impact of cans is getting bigger and bigger. When we started 2015 with beer lovers offline, so in Vienna, in Gummendorfer Straße, it was 90% bottles, 10% cans. Okay. But over the years, it completely changed. Also the breweries changed, and also the perspective of the consumers, the knowledge of the consumer changed, and so now I would say it's almost 60% bottles still, but already 40% cans, so we can see a real impact in cans. And then overall Austria, we can see that cans, especially in urban cities like Vienna, is the most important packaging. For example, in Vienna. What is the reason? It's easier to handle, you have to go up in the second, third floor, maybe you don't have any elevator, then it's easier to handle a 6-pack of cans than a 6-pack of bottles.
Yes.
Outside of Vienna, and it's still the majority of Austria, outside
of Vienna, yes, I think so.
It's still all about the bottles, because most of the people live in their own house, they have their own garden, their own garage, so they go once a week to the supermarkets, to their chain, get in the crate into the car, drive into the garage, put it out of the car, leave it. Next week they go again to the supermarket and fill up the crate. So bottle is still the biggest packaging in Austria overall, but in Vienna it's getting, it will be a change step by step into cans. So cans.
Yeah.
So the people, especially the craft beer people, they know it. But also when it comes to the lager beers, cans are getting better and better. And so I can see a big demand of cans coming in the next couple of months.
That's awesome. It sounds the same thing happened in the U.S. over the last 10 years or so. When I started in this business, it was very bottle focused. Now every new beer that's released is released in cans. Sometimes bottles as well, but mostly cans. And for us as a brewery, we're doing mostly cans as well. Part of that is the environmental aspect to it. And I know a lot of people, especially in Europe, have shared with me concerns about the mining of aluminum, right? Which is a completely legitimate concern. I can't say I'm as familiar with that mining process as I probably should be. I would, however, say that there are other factors that also contribute to environmental impact. One being if you have 6,000 of these on a ship or a truck or a boat or a train, it's a hell of a lot lighter than 6,000 of these. So just within the weight differential, which impacts your benzene consumption and even in some cases your time, the transit time, cans are far superior. So you're using less gas, pumping out less CO2, and you're actually moving more beer further, faster using cans. Again, think huge scale.
But also when you think small, only think about your fridge at home,
Sure.
Sure. 6 cans or 6 bottles.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. You can pick them over it and it's the same size, and then easily you can stock in more cans into your fridge, and that's the most important thing, especially these days,
Most important.
Lockdown, we are not allowed to go out, so.
Right.
Really.
Right. And the other aspect, I mentioned briefly a moment ago was in the U.S., glass is super frowned upon in an outdoor setting. Hiking, biking, camping, rafting, horseback riding, it doesn't matter. You better have a can with you. Number one, if you drop it, you break it, you're going to clean it up, or a kid's going to get some glass in his foot. Also, you drink the can, you crush the can, you put it in your bag, and you recycle it. Now, in the U.S., there are maybe 6 or 7 states that have the Pfand system, like Germany does. So that's a separate sort of issue. But for the most part, aluminum is completely and infinitely recyclable. Yes, it won't be made into another can, but it can be made into any sort of other machinery or equipment or playground or anything that aluminum can be used for. These cans, crush them, smash them, melt them, recast them as whatever you need them to be. So there is a environmental advantage to that as well. Whereas I've been told the glass bottles, say for example in Germany at a brewery, they're only filled 3 times and then they're thrown out, right? So yeah, okay, so it saved 3 bottles, or you used 1 bottle 3 times, but ultimately, glass recycling is unbelievably expensive, unbelievably inefficient, and ultimately, I think most countries, the U.S., we're not really recycling glass. It's next to impossible to do. So again, there's pros and cons with everything, but I think the biggest factor is, the shipping. Beer has to be shipped, no matter what it's in, right? And it's
especially when it comes to returnable bottles, in Germany, you ship the full truck down from the north to the south, then you get the empty ones back shipped from the south to the north. Then you need some chemicals to clean the bottles, to clean the crates, then you have to label it again. So
You got it. That's exactly right. I mean, yeah.
Katharina is telling that she thought that the Tropical is kind of an Radler. And she never bought it before because she thought it's an Radler, but now she gets.
That's a great
IPA. There's no.
There's no fruit juice. Kein Obstsaft.
It has nothing to do with an Radler.
Yeah, there's no Radler, but that's a great, but that's feedback that we want. That's feedback that we need, because if people are looking at this beer in Europe and they think Radler, well, that's a problem, because I don't want a Radler drinker picking this up and being like, oh. And then I don't want an IPA drinker thinking this is a Radler. So that's great. That's great feedback. And I mean, listen, Radlers have their place. I've had a few. But no, it's just a really nice, I mean, the best word for it is tropical. It's a really nice tropical IPA.
So it's the first time I not agree with you, Brent, because Radler is drink juice or drink beer, but never mix that.
No, mix it.
I'm really not a big fan of Radler.
My first time in Germany for my Studentenaustausch in 2001, I saw a person take banana juice into a Weizen beer, and I almost lost my mind. But anyway, so
we're going back to the good things.
Yeah.
I would say we go now for this Bummer, Hoptimum 2020.
This is the hammer. And I'm looking at it and I'm wondering what made me say this second to last. This should probably be last, but it's probably okay.
Oh,
it's okay. It's okay. So I'm actually gonna get a fresh glass for this one.
I get the perfect glass from Studio Out, the IPA glass. So
I've got that one too. It's a nice one. So really cool with this beer, obviously. So it says on the label triple IPA, and I get asked all the time.
And you can already smell it. Everyone who pours the beer now in the glass, it's oof.
Yeah. As soon as you open this beer, the whole room knows it, and that's the idea. Listen, that's part of it. We want to listen when you're talking triple, and this is what I want to say about that really quickly. And people ask about triple or imperial. The reality is there's no legal definition for either. It's not champagne. It doesn't have to be made in this certain way or in this certain region. Like the two words are almost interchangeable, really. But some words, work better for different styles. So imperial stout, pretty common. We make one. Imperial IPA, absolutely. Triple IPA, okay, I get that because I've heard of a double IPA, but you wouldn't really say triple stout. But those words are really interchangeable. So that's my sort of explanation on what is a triple IPA. But I mean, the context is, okay, a normal IPA, as I said, 6 and 7.5%. Double IPA would be 7.6 to 9. Yes. Yeah, depending. And then anything north of that is an imperial or a triple IPA. In this case, let's call it a triple. So, yeah, right away. Yeah, it's big. It's bold. It's a lot of, to me, what we call the C hops, which is Cascade, Centennial, and Chinook. And maybe not all those are in there, but that's what I get.
No, it's also really piney again, you know.
It's very much in the West Coast style, but man, is that got almost a sweet finish. I mean, shit, five ending Plato. So it's much more bitter than the ones we've just had, but it's 68 IBUs, but it's got so much malt sweetness in it that it doesn't really even taste that bitter, even though it is. And I'm looking, it does have Chinook, it does have Columbus, Mandarina Bavaria. It's one of the finishing hops. It's got
German inspiration.
Yeah. Amarillo, Azaka, sorry. And it is 10.6%. So, Vorsicht, be
That's
careful.
the point I would say now, you know, it's super, super dangerous, you know.
Yeah.
It's high ABV wise, but it's really well balanced, you know, so you really can taste the alcohol level it contains, you know, but drinkable like hell, you know, so it's super, super balanced. It really makes fun to drink it, you know.
It does indeed. I mean, it's a beautiful caramel color. It's very rich. I mean, that's a deep, deep amber. I mean, I don't know if we need to talk SRM here, which is the measurement of color in beer, but we could get geeky with it, something like 9. But the other thing I wanted to say as well, like it says on the top, you can see it says 2020. So why did none of these other beers say 2020? Well, they do on the bottom. By the way, you can check your dates on the bottom of all our beers. But the reason we talk about this, it has a specific vintage, right? Because this is a seasonal beer. And it's part of what we call our high altitude series. High altitude, meaning higher alcohol. It's actually brewed, it's released every year, April, May to right about now. Right about now is when it's sort of finishing its season, and then comes our Narwhal Imperial Stout for the winter.
I'm waiting for this.
Exactly. It's coming. It's coming. The Narwhal is coming. The Sea Unicorn is coming. And then the January to February, the January to April beer is called Bigfoot, and that's our barley wine. So if we were having this tasting, or if we do another one at a different season or a different time of the year, we would have maybe the Bigfoot barley wine or the Narwhal Imperial Stout. So this is our nice...
So all the beer lovers, sorry to interrupt you, both beers are pre-ordered and we are safe in Austria. So
yes,
orders are set, so we will get both.
Yes, and every year you will see that they change so the Narwhal will say 2020, and then when you get the next shipment of Bigfoot in January, it'll say 2021. Yeah. And now also let me say, this beer I would not age. I would drink this beer as fresh as possible, even though, yes, it is 10.6% alcohol. The hops are the first thing to go in every beer. It goes right down exactly. However, Narwhal and Bigfoot, myself, I have the last 10 years of Bigfoot, and I have probably the last 6 or 7 years of Narwhal, to waiting on a good friend to visit me in Frankfurt, and we can drink all of them, taste all of them at the same time. after COVID.
I will check some.
So certainly some beers can age gracefully as long as you keep them at a steady temperature, not going too high or too low, and making sure there's no light contact, which, by the way, is another good reason for cans as opposed to bottles. Light can still get in a brown bottle, but light cannot get in a can. So anyway, but back to the beer. So this is this year's Hoptimum. We change the hops in this beer every year, which is why I had to use my cheat sheet, because it changes every year, quite frankly. And so too does the ABV and IBUs. So next year's Hoptimum will be same style, north of 10% triple Imperial IPA, of course, and it'll look very similar, but it'll have different hops. So it's worth checking in on Untapped, but also trying, because it's really fundamentally a different beer. Whereas Pale Ale will be the same today, tomorrow, 40 years from now. It's the same beer. This beer will be different. So I think that's worth mentioning as well. Hoptimum next year will be a different beer. That's good beer.
So there's a recommendation of a food pairing.
Wow. So
we got some recommendation for this beer. It's a goose with what is kraut, cabbage.
Yeah, cabbage.
And
I know sauerkraut. I know that one.
So goose with red cabbage and dumplings.
Okay. All right. I'll have to try that. With this beer, I would say if you're lucky enough to live near an American barbecue place, smoked brisket is awesome with this beer. Brisket is cow, so Rindfleisch, yeah, right?
Rindfleisch, yeah.
And but smoked, has to be smoked. For whatever reason, the smokiness of the meat really sets off the hops in this beer, and vice versa. It's different than spicy stuff, but smoked brisket is a super heavy meat. Typically has a tomato-based sauce with it. So that's really heavy, big food. And you need a really heavy, big beer to pair with that. That would overwhelm all the other beers that we've had. But I think for barbecue, like for me, this beer screams barbecue, or even like fried turkey. I know I'm getting too American.
Yeah, no, it's okay, but it's similar. A fried turkey, for example, it's similar to a fried goose, for example.
Absolutely, yeah.
Now this is the time of the year everyone is eating a goose.
That's right.
Unfortunately, on trade is closed, so all the bars and restaurants are closed. That's the bad thing you have to deal with. But
yes, that's right. You're right, because goose isn't as popular in the U.S., and this is only my second Christmas here. But turkey is. But yes, they're dark meat. They're very rich. They're very fatty. Yes, absolutely. So yes, whoever recommended that. That's spot on. It's a great call. So turkey.
Those are not really a big thing for me, or I think I can speak for most of the Austrians. When it comes to Christmas. But goose is this time of the year right now. It's from beginning of autumn until the end of November, so that's the goose time. Everyone is eating goose, and the restaurants are doing really phenomenal. And then it's going back to also turkey. It's getting more and more popular, because all this kind of American thing is moving to Europe, like Halloween and all that kind of stuff. Even Halloween is an Irish thing, but it gets the American feeling, and so.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, corned beef. You said Irish. That reminds me. Corned beef would be great. Anything with I don't know if you guys have Reubens, but Reubens have corned beef with sauerkraut and a dressing on rye bread, and that with this beer, because that's a lot. That's a lot of fat. That's a lot of this, just juicy, savory, salty stuff. And this beer will cut right through it, which will be awesome. So yeah, anything deep, rich, anything deep and rich. You could even go bitter chocolate with this thing. Not sweet chocolate, I don't think.
Not like original chocolate.
Yeah, original chocolate, bitter. 80% cacao chocolate kind of thing could really do nice with this on a dessert table as well. So, yeah, again, versatile, but in very different ways than what we've had before. Yeah, absolutely. Great beer.
Really good beer. Yeah?
I'll email our brewer after this and tell him well done.
Yeah, you definitely can do this. And also tell them greetings from Austria.
Yep,
we like it also here in Austria.
Okay, so dessert then, huh?
Yes. Before we come to the last beer.
Sure.
Otra vez.
Otra vez. Otra vez.
Otra vez.
The irony of the name.
Not only for me, but also for a lot of bar owners, for a lot of friends of mine. It was a really shocking thing when I have to tell them, listen, it will be not available anymore in Europe.
Yeah.
As far as I know, and I did some research, it was the last beer when Sierra Nevada won something at the World Beer Cup. It was gold.
Yes.
2016.
Yes.
So please tell us, before we taste the last beer, why you stopped.
Sure. Well, point of clarification, it's not just not available in Europe. We have discontinued the brand completely. So it's not as if we're brewing it and keeping it for ourselves in the US, right? Mm-hmm. So the beer itself is no longer being brewed. The gold medal we won was for the style with prickly pear cactus and grapefruit. Mm-hmm. That actually happened right when I started Sierra Nevada, and it was by far, I mean, I knew Pale Ale, I knew Torpedo, of course, their classics, their standards. But when I started with Sierra Nevada, that beer had just come out, and I was drinking it by the gallon. By the liter. And so, I was disappointed as well. 2 years ago, we came out with a different version with the lime and the agave, and you've had both, yes, in Austria.
Yeah, we had both.
So that one was great because it was like a margarita in a glass, right? I mean, it was another one. I liked the first one better, but the short and simple answer is that Americans don't drink Goza. Wow. So even though the beer was brewed, won a gold medal, we put the gold medal on the box, like, hey, this is really good beer. Most Americans don't even know what the hell a Goza is, or where it comes from, or how to pronounce it. so I think,
goose.
Goose, Goza. They call it ghost. Where does it goes? I think the problem is an issue of style understanding. People know what an IPA is. People know what a pale ale is. People know what a stout is. People know what a porter is. But they have no idea that, in 1400, there was this place in Leipzig with salty water that was brewing beer. And, it's just so beyond anything Americans had even tasted. It's salty. It's sour. Now, don't get me wrong. Just like in Austria, there's a cult following for it. There are people that hate the fact that we've discontinued it, yourselves included. But the reality is that as a general market approach, it just wasn't selling. It just wasn't. And it's tough to kill a brand.
You can see this,
Yeah, it's tough to you create this brand, right? Whatever it is, and you love it, and it's good to you because it wins medals and people rate it highly on Rate Beer or Untapped or Beer Advocate. And you send it out into the wider world, and nobody gets it, right? Nobody understands it. And so that's what we sort of found with Otra Vez, and we tried to reinvent it. And it was tough too, because, for me living in Germany, but also having visited Germany and knowing German beer, like, it's tough to market a German style of beer with a Spanish name. Like, that's sort of weird too, right? So I think really what it came down to was just nobody was buying it, or not in the numbers that we needed to keep brewing it at that volume level. Now, that's not to say, Marcus, that the next time you're at the brewery, it might be on tap, my friend.
Okay. That's cool.
And drink
that's
one
cool
for me. I mean, that's the cool thing about our breweries. They both have tap rooms.
We have to go together the next time.
Of course, always. So I think. Listen, it's not completely dead. It's just not available in the wider market. So if I can get some friends of mine in the U.S., the next batch they brew, I'll have them send me some, and I'll send you a couple cans.
Perfect.
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But the point is, when we see now the changing landscape of the younger generations, when it comes to beverages, then it's hard seltzer.
Yeah.
Then it's kombucha.
Yes, we're doing that.
It's a valid point to discuss before we open the next beer. And then it's about beer cocktails,
Yes, of course.
So something which is getting more and more attractive. I don't know if the Austrian market is ready for a kind of beer cocktails, but for example, otra vez can be something like a perfect, as you mentioned before, it can be something like a margarita, something like a beer cocktail.
Yes.
Because especially for people, they really can drink beer because it's bitter, it's hoppy, and all that kind of stuff. So otra vez was something like,
Hey, you don't have to sell me on it, man.
Imagine this. We had it on draft in Austria.
Yeah.
Maybe for the people in Germany, it's unbelievable. But we sold it on draft, and really people liked it, especially in the summer,
Yeah, of course. Yeah, summer.
Slimy, juicy kind of flavor. So it was really, really superb.
Marcus, my friend, you don't have to sell me on this. I love that beer, and it was certainly
perfect. And we are sitting in the same boat.
Yes, we are. We're in the same boat. It was not my decision to discontinue that beer, but of course,
it makes sense. The whole explanation which you gave us, completely makes sense.
Yeah,
it's volume, it's packaging, it needs storage tanks and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
For volume to say, okay. It's over.
It takes investment, time, money, resources to keep a line of beers going, and that's why this year we not only discontinued Otra Vez, you may have noticed, we also discontinued Nooner or Pilsner. We discontinued Hop Hunter, which was a favorite of Ken's. That was one of Ken's favorite beers with hop oil, was brewed with distilled hop oil. Sidecar, the orange IPA. I mean, we've killed some. Let me just say this about Sierra Nevada: we may make a beer you don't like, but we will never make a shitty beer. And we have had to discontinue some really, really quality, good beers. But if they're not being bought, then we can't make them. Yes, it's really.
I completely understand it, It's also, of the percentage what you sell, because you need the space and all the tanks for the big sales.
Yeah.
For the big numbers. There's also a Scottish brewery, they're making the same at the moment, they're stopping. What is the reason? People like it, but volume-wise, they need the space for the big sellers. And that's
exactly.
I completely understand it, but often it's a little bit of upset, when you can see that.
My friend, it's a good question. You can ask me anything like that.
Yes, it's perfect.
Cool. So, last beer.
Last beer? Now we're going to go for the last beer.
Little Nachtisch, little dessert beer for everybody.
Nachtisch, genau.
Yep.
Nachspeise,
yeah. So, this is our, let's see. This is the newest beer, other than the vintage Hoptimum. I think this is the newest beer. This is our wild little thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And when you pour it right away, you notice the color, beautiful ruby colored, a nice deep red. So it's not pink. I mean, I would say that's well, maybe my lighting in here is shit, but it's pink. It's a darker pink, lighter red. super fascinating beer. And no, I've been asked, this is not a replacement for Otravez. As we just discussed, we did the Otravez thing. It worked in some places, didn't work in others. Ultimately, decided to discontinue. But we did also speak about beer cocktails. And I will tell you, there is a bar here in Frankfurt that I introduced this to, and we did a little event. We had pale ale on draft, we had hazy on draft, and then we had cans of this. And then we started pouring this in a little Prosecco, a little ice cube, and we sold out of 2 cases that night, like in 2 or 3 hours. So this is a great beer cocktail beer as well. And why? Well, it's brewed with 3 ingredients that lend themselves to cocktails. The first and most obvious being strawberry, right? It's red, it's fruity, it's got some acidity to it. And the second is the hibiscus, which also lends a little color to this as well. And then we've got guava in it, which is a tropical fruit. So with this beer, I mean, it says slightly sour, but when I think slightly sour, I think Goza. This is not a Goza. There's no salt in it, first of all. And there's no real, I don't think we brew this with lactobacillus, but I'll double check that. But to me, the most obvious thing, of course, is the strawberry and the hibiscus right up front. But when you look at the beer, you think, and you smell the beer, you think fruit, and here comes ice cream, or here comes a milkshake. But it's not. It's totally dry. It is totally dry. I get almost a little puckering at the mouth, which is with a little bit of that slightly sour. Mm. I don't think there's a German word for tart, but that is how I would describe it.
Tart is tart, yes.
Tart is tart. So they call it slightly sour ale. That's just alliteration. It's a tart fruit ale that I think, well, I know this summer I drank more of these than I should have, because it was a hot summer in Germany, and I don't have air conditioning, so what are you going to do? And shockingly, what is the ABV? This is a new beer for us, so
5.5.
5.5. So drinks like a session beer, below 5%, but it's not. It's actually a little bit stronger than you would anticipate. Okay. More closer to our pale ale. So yeah, a different beer, a unique beer, something I thought finished the night. We've had hops. Let's finish with a fruity beer. If we did this tasting a month later, I would finish with a porter or a stout or something super, super dark and rich in chocolate. But, I thought, let's keep it light. Let's keep it light.
Okay. Sonia is asking now, strawberry, how you get the strawberries in the beer?
Great question. So we take each can and we take the strawberries and we shut. No, I'm just kidding. So we actually purchase from a farmer, and I don't know where he or she is, but we purchase the strawberries in bulk, and actually it's a puree, I believe, and so then those are added. Let's see, when are they added? Hang on, it's post fermentation. Sorry. So it's post fermentation, and so the ale itself has already been brewed. I believe the hibiscus is already added early, and then the guava and the strawberry are added post fermentation. Then the residual is filtered out so that you have a nice clear beer. So, but the strawberries themselves they're not picked straight off the vine. They've been harvested, they've been cleaned, and they've been pureed so that there's no risk of wild yeast or bacteria, any sort of wild. I know it's called wild, but it's actually a very controlled process that we don't want any sort of bacterial or strange yeast introduced into the beer to allow for inconsistency. So anyway, so it's post fermentation, but pre-filtering added in, and then I'm not sure how many days it sits on in the beer itself, but yeah. So after fermentation, pureed strawberries that have been cleaned and then filtered out with whatever residuals, whatever else, yeast, whatever fluctuates to the bottom. We take that all out, and we do use two types of filtration. We use a centrifuge, a centrifuge, but we also have the line sheet with the finings in it to filter as well. Depending on the beer, we use both for some. We use one for some. It just depends on the beer. Again, this being our newest beer that we're tasting, I'm not super savvy on all the tech specs of this beer, but again, yeah, it's obviously filtered, so there's no concern about any sort of inoculation from a foreign object. That being said, we do not pasteurize our beer either. A couple craft breweries I know do pasteurize certain beers. We do not. Super important because while it does, so pasteurization, heating the beer up, that can help with consistency issues, but we feel like it also takes away from the beer as well, especially hoppy beers.
Yes, hoppy beers are not the best thing to pasteurize.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you're on the safe side, especially when it comes to export, but when you use a centrifuge, normally you should be on the safe side.
Agreed. I might even take some whipped cream and just do it on the top of there and just like a little strawberry shortcake,
Yeah. No, I can see this point, it's a fair point, go to a bar, like a cocktail bar, something like this, and start making some beer cocktails out of wild little thing, together with some Prosecco. And then, of course, people will go for it,
Yeah.
You like it,
Yeah, or a little flavored vodka or something, little bubbles, little Sprudewasser, and you could have some fun with this beer. But it is, as I said, it's our newest one, super unique. Just got it into Germany right at the summer, and then COVID. And so, how long have you been carrying it?
It was really a replacement, Otherwise was out, and then immediately I get it, out from Wally. Wally told me, it's available, and then we get it,
Yeah.
So we have it, and it's okay,
Yeah, I mean, I get it. Your fans like Otravez. Me too.
But there are, of course, some listeners which really maybe fall in love with that kind of style of beer, and that's completely okay,
Yeah.
Going back, there was hard seltzer, and you were not so super happy, but then it was kombucha.
Yeah.
So, and you mentioned Sierra Nevada is doing kombuchas.
Yes. So hard seltzer, I'm not a huge fan of, not because of the product itself. The product itself is fine, and I will never poo-poo a product that people care to drink.
Yeah.
That's no problem. No, you drink what you want. Drink what makes you happy. What's concerning for me about hard seltzer is it's not taking the shelf space of Budweiser, Miller, Coors, whoever. It's taking craft shelf space. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's not right. And obviously that affects my business and affects craft beer as a whole, which my opinion about craft beer is it's like we're all on a boat, right? We're all in the same boat, and a rising tide lifts all ships. Craft beer is still so small in the grand scheme of beer or an alcoholic beverage. So the better that other craft breweries do, and the better we do, then we all grow together. So when you have a new product, a couple of years ago it was cider. Hard cider was a huge deal in the U.S. Now it's hard seltzer. When those products come in, that's fine. Drink them all day long. But when those products come in and they start cutting out the craft beer from a grocery store or a bottle shop, that's a problem. You have 30 facings of Budweiser. You can't cut a couple of those and put some hard seltzer there. So the same with us,
But sorry to interrupt you.
Not at all.
why do you think it takes space of craft beer? And can it be a fault of the American Brewers Association? Because they are talking...
You're asking loaded questions, Marcus. I can't be answering those questions.
Okay, but that's what I can see, because I'm really into beer, and I follow the whole industry and the whole stories. And when you're telling me that hard seltzer is taking space of craft beer, but not of,
right,
let's say, industrial beer,
yeah,
it's really interesting to hear this. And that's why I'm asking you, do you think that the Brewers Association at the moment is doing wrong?
No.
Because they are writing so many articles, and so many stories about hard seltzer that maybe the brewers, because they need to get, let's say, a second business model, because they need something which most of the Americans are into, because they need something new. Okay, then let's do hard seltzer because everyone is talking about hard seltzer. And immediately, when the breweries start doing hard seltzers, then it's their own fault because they're doing hard seltzers. And then, of course, they're going to lose sales space in the supermarket chains.
Sure.
That's what I think, because, and then I'm finished, hard seltzer, in my opinion, will not be a big thing in Europe.
Yeah, I agree with your last sentence. I don't think it will be either. However, I don't think the Brewers Association has anything to do with it. I think what it comes down to, and every market is so different all around Europe, all around the world, and then even within a country, or like the U.S., you have different states with different laws. No, I don't think it has anything to do with it. I think that state by state, case by case, a lot of the distributors make a lot of money from the bigger beers, the bigger beer houses, and it's the same in Germany. And I'm not going to throw out names. You know them all. The top 3 or 4 breweries in Germany or Austria, and they control the space. They control the sets. They make the planet, what we call a planogram. So you have a grocery store. It has a beer shelf. That beer shelf is very planned. It is drawn out, and every beer has its space. And so the people that control that, they've had to make way for craft beer because of the demand. The demand's so high. But now there's so much diversification within craft beer. There's physically no way a grocery store shelf can hold every single craft beer available in a given city, whether you're in Munich or New York, it doesn't matter. So then you have this new thing, like, again, a few years ago it was hard cider. This year it's hard seltzer. Next year it's hard kombucha, which we're brewing, and we may brew a hard seltzer. Again, I'm not against the product itself. It's a great, listen, if that's what your thing is, that's what your thing is. But again, my question is, if industrial beer is losing market share, then put the hard seltzer in their space,
in the craft space.
Not the craft space. That's my only point. Again, people are going to drink whatever makes them happy, and they should. It really doesn't matter as long as as long as you understand where your dollar or where your euro is going. I think be responsible and understand that, like, are you supporting local? Are you supporting regional? I work for an American brewery in Europe, but I work for a family-owned brewery. Your dollar is not going to the New York Stock Exchange, right? It's going to other things that we talked about earlier today. So again, hard seltzer that's not the problem. The change in the public's taste. I mean, craft beer is about 15% of the.
There was a question which came out. How big is what's the percentage of craft beer at the moment in the States?
15%, give or take. Yeah, give or take. It depends on if you're looking at volume or dollars spent, but let's call it 15%. Whereas in a country like Germany, it's less than 1%.
Maybe it's not listened. It's not listed in the turnouts of the reports. Yeah.
So craft beer, while still growing in certain markets, there's a challenge there. And so then in those markets, to then get your space cut out from you, with a product that essentially isn't beer. I mean, it's basically carbonated vodka. It's basically a vodka soda, which is good. It's fine. I've had plenty, and some are good and some aren't. But that's when I roll my eyes about hard seltzer. It's not because I'm worried about it. Like look, if you want a hard seltzer, you're going to drink a hard seltzer. You're not going to drink, Sierra Nevada Pale Ale that night. Right? There's no overlap in taste, but what it does do is it can take, there's a finite amount of shelf space. There are a finite number of tap handles in the world, right? So how do we all fit? How do we all play along? And so in different countries it's different. And for us, yes, we are launching a kombucha. Sorry, we just actually started doing that a few months ago. Right in time for COVID. It's a really cool product. It's obviously tea based, so it's very different than beer in that sense. And it's obviously more fruit driven. So a lot of adjunct, a lot of fruit added to the product, the tea, the fermented tea. I actually have only had a taste of one of ours. There is no plan to send any to Europe because it has to be. We ship our beer cold, but kombucha, you have to keep cold from top to bottom. It can't warm up, otherwise you risk re-fermentation, and then
it's gonna be a bomb. Yeah.
Yes. So maybe one day in Europe, but not anytime soon. But I'm excited. I mean, it's a new sort of. It's similar, but it's different. And again, hopefully it doesn't take away the space from craft beers. I will tell you, in most supermarkets in the U.S. that sell kombucha, it probably won't even be with a beer. It'll be with the other kombuchas, right? Kombucha essentially has alcohol in it to begin with. You can take it out. Most that are sold it's like less than 0.05%, so that people under 18 or whoever can buy it. Ours has alcohol in it. That's fine. But it's seen as more of a health drink and sort of, something that's a little bit new age, a little bit cutting edge. So I'm excited about it, but we won't really, I think, see it over here as much.
The brand will be called Sierra Nevada Kombucha?
No, it'll be called Strange Beast. Strange Beast. And when we say strange, it's as in like strain, as in a strain of yeast, and then GE, and then beast.
Beast.
I can send you the information on it, my friend. No worries there.
Perfect. Yeah. Okay.
Any more questions?
Gibt es noch Fragen von den Zuhörern? Are there any more questions from the audience?
What's the word for audience in German?
Zuhörer, Publikum. Publikum.
Okay. I'm learning.
Yeah. Okay. So, it's over. I think, it's late. We started 20 minutes later, so we had a great time. So I personally had a fantastic time together with you. It was a really pleasure.
Gleichfalls.
Ja. So es war wirklich sehr schön, mit dir über Bier zu reden.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed the tasting together with you. I learned also from me, and I'm in the industry since 16 years already. And as we already discussed, you're learning every day something new. And
sure.
It was also something new for me about some products, about some new things like the kombucha. So I'm learning every day, and I would say thank you for your time. Thank you for the openness, the transparency, to telling us what really I want to know. You were telling us, then we get some questions. You answered all of them. It was really nice. Maybe you have some words for the Austrian beer drinkers, beer lovers, hobby beer drinkers. We can spread.
Sure.
In these challenging days.
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you all out there for joining us. I appreciate, Markus, the Einladung. The invitation was very nice, and I hope to see your great country again soon. I would say, listen, it is tough times. It's tough times out there. Go to your local bar, get takeout as much as you can, support these guys, support your local craft beer scene. The reality is, Austria, Switzerland, all these countries in Central Europe, like, craft beer is still so young and it's so new. And as I said, we're all in the same boat. We only grow together. So it's not just about Sierra Nevada. It's not just about, the small guy in Vienna or Salzburg or Seefeld. I think I had a couple there, by the way. It's good in February before COVID hit. But it's really just about, supporting craft beer and buying intelligently, knowing where your euro goes. So does it go to a big company that owns 15 different breweries, or does it go to a smaller company? So keep supporting craft beer, keep supporting your local bars and restaurants. We'll get through this together, I think, and hopefully I'll get to see you all when I'm in Vienna in person, maybe next year's Craft Beer Fest, who knows? And we can all toast a beer and look back on these times and say, wow, we learned a lot, but we got through it together, right? Mm-hmm. So anyway, cheers and thank you again.
Perfect last words from you, Brent. Hopefully, because the next edition, normally it's always spring and autumn. So next edition, because this year it's more or less cancelled.
Yeah.
The funny point is it's still not officially announced that there is no craft beer festival in November, but everyone knows it's cancelled. Yeah. And the next edition will be in May. So that's a spring edition.
Yeah.
So once again, thank you for this really great evening.
Sehr gerne.
Es freut mich. Es war mir eine Ehre. So, was bleibt mir zu sagen? Danke nochmals fürs Zuhören. Danke für die Geduld. Es tut mir irrsinnig leid, dass wir um 30 Minuten später begonnen haben. Neues Team, neues Glück. Der Anfang ging leider schief, aber ich glaube, dass während der Verkostung jetzt alles wirklich toll funktioniert hat. Kurze Werbung noch in eigener Sache. Am 17. November haben wir die nächste Verkostung. Es ist ein Revival von Cordoba, also das Thema ist Österreich gegen Deutschland. Es wird sicher Spaß machen. Wir haben einen deutschen Gast und wir haben unseren altbekannten Andreas Urban und mich, und wir werden gemeinsam schauen, wer das geschmacksvollere Bier oder wer das intensivere Bier braut, und werden halt so einen kleinen Wettbewerb machen, eben sprich Cordoba Revival Österreich gegen Deutschland. In diesem Sinne sage ich danke fürs Zuhören, danke für die Geduld, bleibt zu Hause, trinkt die Biere aus, einen schönen Abend und bis zum nächsten Mal. Gute Nacht.